welcome to Agile on Air. I'm Phil Cutcliffe and I have Dan Gibson with me. This is a channel where we take agile and lean and digital concepts and try and make them as simple as possible.
We try.
And share a lot of our experiences along the way.
Excellent. Well, today we're starting a series where we're talking about waste. Where does waste come from? The concept.
Yeah, well, it's from lean, isn't it?
Yeah.
So depending on who you're talking to, you might get 7 or 8 wastes.
7 or 8 wastes of lean, or there's a load of waste they define. We're not going to talk about any of those.
No, well, they come out of manufacturing, don't they? And actually, a lot of what we're talking about isn't manufacturing. It's office work, and we got a particular focus on software development.
Yeah.
And want to try and make it a bit real and share some experiences.
Yeah, I think we're just picking experience that we've had and going, we see waste there, and there'll be things that may be quite obvious to you. They might be involved with concepts we talked about before, and some very typical agile concepts. But we may have topics in there that you thought, hang on, I didn't realise that might be waste. And I think today we're starting off with a corker, which is a bit of a left field one, which is one of the key wastes of large organisations, I feel, and that is overly prettifying PowerPoint. Try saying that after a few shandies.
Yes.
So, do you want me to say where we're coming from on this?
Yeah, I think we've all seen quite a lot of PowerPoint, but...
Yeah, and I think the pandemic's been like a real boon for PowerPoint, and it's been, as we haven't been able to go into offices, a lot of us have been engaged in doing slides because it's the only way we can visually transmit ideas when we're on a call, unless we're using Miro or
Mural or whiteboarding
software. But I think most people are doing PowerPoint, and the pandemic has kind of it's had a mass generation in terms of the number of outputs of slides per person, per organisation, because of the situation we're in.
It was bad before, wasn't it? But I think we're at new levels of PowerPoint creation.
I think we're at new levels of PowerPoint creation, and I haven't really got anything fundamentally against PowerPoint or any other presentation tool of your preferred brand.
Yes.
But I think what I have got something against is organisations spending time overly designing it for some very obvious reasons and some unobvious reasons, which I'll talk about now. What I want to do is just go through a short illustration of how I think this happens, how we get into a situation where we end up with people doing pointless work in PowerPoint rather than meaningful work in PowerPoint. Now, I believe it all starts off with maybe 1 or 2 people in an organisation who've got some awesome presentation skills, refining of PowerPoint to make it look really good. Now, I've got nothing against Big Four consultancies, but they have a lot to blame in this regard. So the typical pattern is that I see a Big Four consultancy comes in. I'm not naming names, but they're one of the Big Four, and these guys, this is their bread and butter. They are very good at producing presentation material, and in fact, a lot of them have got template libraries, vast template libraries you can just delve into for whatever. Like, you want the agenda slide, the pop-out agenda. Here it is. You've got the roadmap, but it's with a rocket going to the moon in it, and you can put your your destinations and your outcomes en route, and it just looks great. Or you've got your salient 3 points condensed and a beautiful presentation, and they'll spend time branding that for the branding of their main customers as well. So they've got a real head start over anybody else in the organisation because they don't share these templates with the organisations they're working with. Now, they come in and the game is raised up a level in terms of the material that's presented. And then people look at that and senior management go, well, it's a great presentation. Why aren't our staff doing stuff like this? And they may not be doing that, but then other staff within the organisation go and they look, oh my God, look at the quality of the stuff they're producing. I think I've got to make my stuff look like that. So this is what I've seen. I've seen large organisations hire Big Four consultants just to do presentations for senior staff. So that's whole consultants and groups of them engaged just to work on the presentations and making them look good for senior members of staff.
Well, yeah, I've seen it, but it's worse as well. Often consultancies are brought in, and the sole output of their work isn't working software. It's not something physically built. Yeah, it's a deck.
Yeah,
and someone will come in and they'll be there for a number of months, and at the end of it, they'll hand over a slide deck.
Yeah. I think I rewrote the Agile Manifesto at one client I went to. It was the true measure of progress is how many slides of pretty PowerPoint you've got, and we know it's not right, but you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes it's the only output,
yes.
and this is the problem I have here, because you're engaging people in just creating that output. So one of the wastes is getting Big Four consultants, paying them quite high rates. You generally don't get any change out of £1,500 a day for those guys. So if you're going to bring teams of them in to write PowerPoint for you, then you have got waste there instantly.
Yes.
Right. Now the other thing is, if everybody else gets in this whole merry-go-round, and I have to say, I'm a victim. You're
a victim of PowerPoint.
I am. I've been in jobs going, I've got to make this look better to get up to the standard of the organisation, and it's hard because the idea is the same. It's just you've got to up the game in terms of the presentation, right? So, yes. I believe that I'm not the only person who feels like that. I believe there's lots of people in the organisation that feels like that. Now, I don't think it would be hard. So I think it's quite easy to put a price on the amount of waste with the consultants you're hiring.
Yes.
Just to do the presentations for you. Then I think there's that element which is, I don't think it's too hard to get a rough estimate of the cost of PowerPoint on an organisation. Say you had 1,000 people in your organisation which were engaged in communicating to each other in Zoom calls and presentations. Not hard to imagine. In a large organisation of certainly 20,000 or 30,000, you're going to have 1,000 people who are kind of engaged in office, thought-based activity, communicating with each other. Now imagine if, let's say out of those 1,000 people, let's imagine that they spend 5% of their time just raising the game on their PowerPoint. I kind of think possibly that's an underestimate for some people, but maybe some people don't get caught in this whole merry-go-round. So 5%, you've got 50 people, and that's 50 man years in a whole year that you've spent 50 people in a year at whatever salary. Say you're paying them 50,000 each.
And it's typically more, the further higher up you go, the more you'll see the PowerPoint. And when we're in a office, as an agile coach, as a consultant, effectively, I'd get to work with a lot of teams, and I'd get to walk to different areas and see different teams. Yeah. And maybe this is just me, but I used to like to look at people's screens and see what work they were doing. Yeah. And just the general feel of how many people in the office were working on presentations.
Facebook presentation.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I know, it's just everybody's got the deck open. And I think, we've mentioned here the obvious wastes in terms of people's time, right? For doing stuff that isn't, like you said, it's not working software. It's not a delivered process, a delivered end-to-end process, if they're writing it for a business domain. It is just an idea en route to doing that.
It's a way of communicating.
Yeah.
But I don't even think actually as a way of communicating it's a particularly good one. So
yeah. So let's unpack that a minute. So okay, because I'm going to give an example towards the end of a presentation that got lauded. All right, and but let's think about the different realms in which we're using presentations as our medium. So training, for example.
Yes. Well, we're both experienced trainers.
Yeah.
And when you're delivering certified courses, as a certified trainer, you don't get to pick the slides.
You don't.
You have to use the slides that are provided by the organisation.
And
that
some
provides
providers
the certification.
Some providers that
provide lots of slides.
Yeah. There's one particular, culprit I'm thinking of. Begins in say and ends in AIF.
Yes, so it's a good old scaled agile framework. But I think it's the same for a lot of them.
Yeah.
But when we're training our SAFE courses, there's 200 slides in that deck.
Yeah.
And I've got a good friend of mine actually. He's just been on a SAFE course, and his trainer just read through the slides. So that was his training to go through the slides. And it's not how, at the end of it, he's not going to learn in the same way.
I don't think you can blame PowerPoint for that. That's just although...
No, but it's as a medium for passing on knowledge. So when we're running courses, we'll try and have lots of activities. The slides will be there as a reference perhaps, but they won't be the only thing. And what I find is a lot of organisations actually are assuming that slides are the best way of passing on knowledge. I've done a slide deck and I've presented it at the 5 o'clock call.
Well, it's actually, you've kind of got some finished output. That's security and output, isn't it? That actually, but it's a false output. And I think with training it is a bit of a false output. Because it's like, okay, I've got a slide deck now. Surely I'll engage my trainees. Surely I've got my ideas thought out well. When it's really actually, you want to focus on the exercises, activities they're doing to try and embed the knowledge rather than just the content of the slide deck. The slide deck's useful to back up the knowledge, but hey, if you're going to rely on it and read it out, bad training.
Yeah, well, bad anything really as a medium for passing information. I'm not convinced, and there's been studies out there where they've quizzed people and said, well, would you rather have a slide deck presentation or just be talked to? And they've generally come to the conclusion that slides don't necessarily add to the retaining of knowledge.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the other situations in which they're used, in which like when we're in meetings and we're conveying new ideas to people to try and help communicate our new idea. And, to be fair to people in the pandemic, they haven't been able to get in a room with each other and just whiteboard an idea out. They've got to, if they've got some visual ideas to help back up their idea, they've usually, turned to PowerPoint to help cement that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that then.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not... We're picking on PowerPoint a lot here because it's the one that's used. But I've seen slides in all sorts. I've seen someone take collaboration tools and virtual whiteboards and effectively draw out slides and go one by one through them. So it's not a tool necessarily.
No, and that's it. And so with Miro and Mural as well, I've seen people produce Miros and Murals just to convey a quick, one-off idea that have been overly designed as well. So it's not. I mean, we can pick on PowerPoint, but it usually is PowerPoint.
It usually is. It is normally PowerPoint. Yes.
It's not generally Google Slides,
No.
but it tends to be organisations that use PowerPoint, and it tends to be PowerPoint. But yeah, there are other tools that can be victim to this prettying up of ideas. Now, I went through quite a lot of those obvious wastes, which were the cost, the man hours that people are going to spend prettying stuff up when they could have just stuck with a nice rough idea and just the salient facts. I've talked about the consultants coming in, but I think there's some less obvious wastes around here, right? Now, one of my fears when I see good slide decks, and this is whether people are doing sales to me or whether like they're selling an idea, and I don't think you should be trying to sell in an idea in an organisation. You should be trying to discuss it, and you should all be trying to pick holes in it or see the good side of it, right? It shouldn't be a sales exercise. But I feel like when you're prettifying PowerPoint, it becomes a bit of a sales exercise, and bad ideas can be disguised by good design and silky smooth rhetoric from whoever is presenting them.
Yes.
So I feel like it's the ultimate disguise for a rubbish idea is a glossy deck.
Yes.
Right? And I think for me that's key. The other thing I feel as well is if you spend a lot of time creating something that it looks good and it's taken a lot of time to get there, the inertia to change it is high because you've invested a lot of time getting to that point. Whereas if you'd just done a quick pencil diagram, knocked something up and rubbed it off on a whiteboard, you'd change your ideas more quickly. And I think that's why Agile has evolved like it is, with sticky notes pasted on boards and people just tearing them down and then putting them back up, and everything like on library cards and flicking around a backlog. It's because we know those methods. It's easy to rip an idea out once you've kind of dismissed it as a bad idea, rather than having burned lots of time on like a document or a PowerPoint or whatever.
Yeah, they're often shiny but flawed.
Yeah, I think that's key. And
well, that kind of leads me on to another pet hate I spot with them, is that they're often a very curated view. Someone has taken time to present the facts as they see it. So one of the things I'm a huge believer in is transparency of data. Yeah. So trying to use real data, real metrics where possible.
Yes.
And what you see in PowerPoint is this shiny massaged view where everything's fantastic. I mean, I don't know about
really
you, but we used to call them watermelon projects,
right?
Because you looked at the PowerPoint and they're all green on the outside,
right?
But they're red in the middle. So people having red, amber, green in their status reports.
Right. Okay. This is interesting because there are quite a lot of management teams we've worked with are very adverse just to going straight into Jira or whatever tool you're using to look at the data about how people are performing.
Yes.
They want to be able to add a narrative to that.
Yes.
And so, you get this kind of, it's like your PowerPoint smokescreen, isn't it? That you've got in the middle, which hides from the real truth.
Yes.
But I think
I don't know how you'd even express that as a waste, but it is a
but it is a waste because it's a waste in terms of it stops people making the right decisions. So if you're going to provide, it's a typical thing, and I think we can probably point to an organisation we worked with, and the actual delivery we knew from looking at the data was probably going to be months and months in the future, not within the 3-month window that everybody at a senior level thought it was going to be at. That middle management were telling them it was going to be all good for this. And we were looking at the data going, no, this just isn't right. There's too many items to do that are, within the scope of this to finish before that time. So it's going to be late. But the view that was presented always was, hey, yeah, everything's great, everything's green. And no, it's not. And if you don't allow people to make the right decisions, you're going to waste money sort of ramping up teams for rollout, or getting people, or even worse, engaging the teams that are delivering on other stuff, because you think, they're 3 months, must be capacity for other things, let's just throw some more stuff in there. And so I think, it just leads to poor decision making that puts waste into the organisation. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like the PowerPoint shiny smoke screen that tells you everything is great when it's actually rubbish. I thought I'd mention the fact that's quite important is that some organisations have banned PowerPoint.
Amazon,
yeah. Yes. So Amazon, and it was largely for that reason I was talking about. It's slightly different, the idea they went across there. They thought that the presentation style didn't lend itself well for people thinking out their ideas.
Yes.
And they thought a document format, which doesn't necessarily take any shorter time to do than a PowerPoint presentation, but thought a document format where you present your ideas in a narrative, it needs to be well thought out, just like when you're reading a book. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because you think, if I read an agile book, like if I go and want to read about user stories by Mike Cohn, it's not a bunch of slides with some pretty pictures and some bullet points going bang, bang, bang. It's like a narrative with description, and it builds around, its case for how you should do things. And so they use that idea internally, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think, they're very cognizant of the fact that actually, when they were in the presentation world, ideas could be sold with pretty pictures and bullet points and people with silky smooth sales skills.
Yes.
Whereas in the document world, where I think their meetings, didn't they stop them for like 15 minutes at the beginning for everybody to read the document?
That's what I've read, yeah. They stopped them, allowed them to, digest it.
It kind of makes sense. You digest the material, it's written out, it's just, there's no kind of sales sheen around it. It's just an idea on the page. Let's read this and have a round the table discussion about it.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds sensible.
I can see a logic to it.
Yeah.
I do have a particular case study that I'd like to share for PowerPoint. So this was back in the pre-COVID world where people could be in the same office.
Right.
And there was a particularly meaty PowerPoint presentation. I remember we were receiving at least 20 slides.
Right.
One of those. And I'm there. It's being presented by a very senior manager. I'm sitting next to another very senior manager. And we're receiving this presentation. And I look over at the manager next to me, and he's not listening. He's just not there. So we're all at our desks, and he's preparing his slides for the next meeting.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you're not listening. You're preparing your slides that someone else is going to ignore in 10 minutes' time.
Yeah. I think that's actually easier to do in the modern COVID world, isn't it? Like, when everybody's behind their screens at home, it's a lot easier just to be on the conference call but not present, doing something else.
It got worse, right? So I being a little bit disruptive, must admit, thought I'd go and look at the other people who were also supposed to be watching this presentation. And you could see it on everyone's screens around the office, the same pretty well managed slides. And I reckon about 25% of the people were actually watching the presentation and taking it in. Some were on Facebook, some were on their phones, some were just doing other work while it was going on in the background. Some were just having a conversation.
Right.
So, if we're looking at time wasted, just receiving a presentation, it's not.
Yeah. Obviously,
People don't take it in.
Obviously, it wasn't pretty enough.
The answer wasn't prettier slides. That I'm sure. You needed better transitions.
Yeah, better transitions.
more animations.
Yeah. More animations. Yeah. Fantastic. So I think, we've gone through some of the wastes. We've talked about the obvious monetary wastes that you can spot, and then some of the not so obvious wastes that are lurking behind the scenes. Is there anything else that you want to mention about this?
I think I've covered everything on my cheat sheet.
Yeah, because I don't really want people to think I'm knocking PowerPoint here, because actually I think it's got its place. And actually, I'm not going to knock prettifying PowerPoint that's going to be for something that's reused and reused. So
Oh, you've hit something I have forgotten.
What?
Redoing stuff. So, yes. So there is another issue with PowerPoint. Is permanence.
Yeah.
So often I'll see a slide deck done. It's great, and okay, fine. Even if it's a good one, it gets sent out, and then it sits in your email. And often that store of information, that work, just falls down your email trail, and it's 6 months later, a year later, it's done again.
Right.
So it's one of the things I will always try and do with an organisation is I try and do less PowerPoint, and if I want to store information, we'll create it on a wiki or a SharePoint site.
Yeah.
So it's got more permanence.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. It sounds good. And actually that it is better, just constantly random PowerPoints or any attachment flung around email boxes is usually bad.
Yeah.
Putting them on a shared site is usually good, because then you've got all shared access to it. But I think I'm going to end by saying that I'm not specifically attacking PowerPoint as a medium here. I am attacking over-prettifying it, right? And I think there's something that that would kind of prove my case on this, in that if you look, I can't even remember the year of this now, but there's a really good presentation. It's called Netflix Freedom and Responsibility Culture. It's done on Google Slides rather than PowerPoint. So I don't know whether that's a get out clause, but it's this is by Reed Hastings, who was top honcho in Netflix, and it's a bunch of slides, right? You look at those slides, they're using the basic template on Google Slides with a little Netflix logo in the bottom right hand corner. It's as simple as it could be. But the content's awesome, right? And this deck was lauded by people like Sheryl Sandberg, going, this is one of the most landmark papers of the Valley of this century, And so it was cited by many people, and it's a really good read, and it's a presentation. I'm not knocking presentations, but you look at that, it didn't need to be tarted up. The content was stellar. It was really good, a real eye-opener. And it just stood on its own right. Okay, so not knocking PowerPoint, knocking prettifying PowerPoint.
Yes, and spending too much time on it.
Yeah, because it can be a useful medium, and I will continue to use it, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're still going to go away and do slides, but
yeah,
yes, but there'll be ugly slides.
There'll be ugly slides. Oh, you pay somebody to pretty them up for you.
Some people do.
Some people do that, don't they?
Yes.
Is that a waste, though?
Probably.
Or is it just keeping people employed? Well, would you like to summarise? Or shall I summarise?
You summarise.
So, we're not criticising PowerPoint as a medium. We are criticising prettying up PowerPoint unnecessarily. We're criticising that because it'll take a lot of your own staff's time, And if you raise the level, if you raise the bar in your organization of design standards of PowerPoint, you'll be on downward spiral into absorbing a lot of your staff's time into just sexing up slides. Now, you will, if you do the kind of organisation that's like that, you're probably going to get big four consultancies in to produce slide decks, or prettify the ideas that are coming out of your own staff and just to present them to a senior level. That'll be a waste in its own right. How you get out of that cycle, there's got to be somebody very brave. It's got to be like Bezos in Amazon going, yeah, I'm banning PowerPoint now. But, to extract yourself from that cycle, it's going to be quite hard, right? Now, we've talked about the obvious wastes of it. We thought there are unobvious wastes as well. So the unobvious wastes are, that kind of inertia around changing things, changing ideas. We talked about how it kind of bad ideas can be dressed up by, pretty slides. We talked about using PowerPoint as a smokescreen to mask from the real truth, when you could have just looked in Jira and saw that it was a mess. But actually you decided to look on a prettified slide deck that told you it was great. We've gone through a number of things, and I think those are the main things. But, also finished up by saying, hey, PowerPoint has a place, and there are some really good things that have been presented in a slide format. Just they didn't need to be prettied up. Job done.
Job done. Well, thank you. I will continue to produce my particularly ugly slides.
Yeah, I've got a great template for agility that means that you can just produce great slides every time.
Very good. Okay.
But I think we had a branding change, so I think probably need to work on that.
Great.
Excellent. All right, so that's PowerPoint. Next time, we'll probably choose a more obvious waste type. Maybe. But, you'll have to stay tuned to see what we're going to choose. It's going to be a good one, I'm sure. We'll be back in the new year, and see you soon.